hello. Would you like to be more magical in your communication and experience of life? Maybe you'd care to be more wanton in your expression and creativity. Perhaps you'd like to have more fun and excitement and be wanton in ecstasy. Perhaps you'd like to participate in the dance yourself and create new experiences and be at the forefront of the development of hypnosis as a field. I guess if the answer to those questions is yes, then it's probably worth continuing to watch the video. I'm going to talk about trance. And in doing so, I'm going to step outside of the usual parameters of the linguistics of the structure of hypnosis as such. Because, of course, trance existed before the word hypnosis, existed before the word mesmerism, existed before the word magnetism, and existed before many of the other words. In fact, it existed before words existed. Now, that means that there was an ancient knowledge available which still exists today. And trance is the gateway to the experience to which I'm currently alluding. And all the mystical processes which came from it. So I guess one of my questions to you, because I would love a chance to express all of this to you and make a few suggestions along the way, like it is okay if I make suggestions, isn't it? Is where do thoughts come from? Yeah, I know we could intellectualize. But inside of yourself and your experience, where does thought actually come from? And where does it go back to when you're done with it? See, to me, over the last 30 years, 27 of which are in the field of hypnosis and NLP. But for years I was a therapist before that, and then there are more things before that, which in the instance of time, I may have time to discuss and elevate such things to you. But I don't have the time at the moment to explain my full pathway, except to give you little pointers along the way. However, over the last 30 years, I've seen thousands of people, so many that I've lost count, and helped almost all of them. And there have, of course, been times when I haven't been useful. I wouldn't claim 100% to be able to do anything, actually. Given that I'm a human being, and by the very nature of being a human being, occasionally I make mistakes. I can be aware of myself and my body and my language, and I can still stub my toe on a big rock and suddenly lose my moment of presence and express myself in words which are probably quite shocking even to hear. And then I regain, of course, my sense of self and move past that moment. You know, sometimes I fall, but that doesn't stop me from walking or running or reaching for my own potentials. And I'm not afraid to make mistakes, because through making mistakes, I've actually achieved what I've achieved along the way. And all of this actually comes from my understanding of what could be called ancient knowledge and trance and mystical processes. And so I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of my own personal pursuit, which goes back a long, long way, which is engaged in Japanese systems, primarily ki, as some people call it, Kundalini energy or ki. Ki will do. Ki is a word that's not even translated around the planet. People just use the word ki. And other forms from the same area of living, so Kotatama, Zazen, Zen, Aikido, Iaido. And these are all terms which, of course, are familiar to me. So I'll unpack some of them over the next half an hour or so. But where does it all come from? Where's it all going to? What's my experience moment to moment? Because even those sentences I've just spoken are gone, right? And you can't have them again. Yeah, you can replay it afterwards. Yeah, I can have it again. Yeah. But the moment's gone. And the next moment hasn't happened. So there really is only the present moment, right now, right now, right now, right now. And if I'm noticing anything else, then I'm probably not noticing right now. It's such a simple concept that I think that most people miss it. They get the intellectual idea that there's only the present exists, but not living it. There's a difference between being and talking about. So I am enamored of a book, actually, by Jack Cornfield, which says, after the ecstasy, the laundry. And I love that. The idea that, yeah, you can get enlightened and everything, that's all very well, but there's still dirty socks on the floor, right? They still need picking up and putting in the washing machine. So it's not like you arrive at a destination of ultimate, everythingness and merge with the universe and, I'm sure I'll have my day for that. It's the one thing that's guaranteed if you're born. But before I get to that place where this wonderful form stops hanging out in the physical realm and becomes recycled into other living forms that will come after me, I do not think that I'm the form. I don't experience as being the form. The form is useful. It's my job to take care of it, right? Put parts of the universe into it that continue to create this universe in which I'm experiencing the physical form. But what am I going to do with my time here, right? I could chase money, but I've never known anyone take any with them. And I have enough anyway. Health is important to me, to look after this form. I'm made of what I eat. I'm made of what I put in. I'm made of the bits of the universe that I actually ingest. That universe which wiggles through me. So I do my best with that, to eat very balanced and healthy diet, and to supplement in such a way that's useful for me, and to look after my mind. And this is the part for me which involves trance. So if you take a moment of me when I was 5, for example, and that's when I began meditating. Now, looking back, was I really meditating when I was 5? Probably not, right? I was mimicking. But, it's because I saw a TV series in which someone was meditating and appeared to be quite cool. And for some reason I decided to identify with that and then copied what I was seeing, and that was how I started on my journey towards meditation. Now, by the time I was 7, 8, 9, I was probably getting better at it. By the time I was 13 or 14, I was much better at it. And I also had been on stage since I was 4, and I was still on stage by 13 or 14. I'd sung in a choir of over 10,000 people, for example, by that time. So I was taking on board music. I understood music. I could sight sing. I could do all those things that musicians do with music in its written form. I was starting my martial art journey, and I was going into the mountains. And if you look at me now, you flash forwards, I'm going to have to count it, 43 years further on. I'm still on stage performing. I'm still practicing a martial art. I'm still fascinated by language and the connection between language and the moment-to-moment experience. And I think that if you permit me to simplify things so much that they become super, super simple. And the beauty is in the application, not in the understanding. So, for example, I've talked about Aikido. I've mentioned Aikido, so I'm going to look at it as a word for a moment. You know, Aikido. There's three sounds in there, three characters. I means love, but also means harmony. Ki is ki, yeah, energy, also spirit, and do is the way. So one translation of Aikido is the way of harmonizing with all things, or the way of loving all things through energy. The way of harmonizing with all spirit, with it all. The way, the do. And the place where we practice is called a dojo. So you may have heard that word, dojo. Well, we have do again, which is the way. And we have jo. Jo's an interesting word because it means, amongst other things, it means the staff, the stick. Most martial arts have a stick all over the world. There are sticks, and people have used them. So in Japanese, that's called a jo. And jo is also representational of the spine. And jo also is representational of enlightenment. And it's also a representation of cleansing and Kundalini. So the staff is a representation of Kundalini, energy, enlightenment, cleansing, the way of enlightenment, dojo, the way of cleansing, the way of Kundalini, the way. So my attempt inside a dojo is to attempt to connect with it all and to leave the dojo having practiced that sense of connectedness and to see how far I get today. Do I get as far as the changing rooms before I forget and I'm thinking of the shopping? Do I get as far as the car before I forget and I start thinking about the person that's just driven in front of the car? Do I get meters up the road? How far do I get this time? But the attempt is to take it out of the dojo and live it, because it's not something for just inside the dojo. And incidentally, martial art, there's two words there. One is martial and one is art. Am I being martial right now? Certainly not. I hope I never am. So what's the point in learning? Well, the second word is art. See, self-defense is defense against the self. And part of that overall package, because it's a complete system, would include Zazen, which is seated meditation, in which there is no practice, there is no teaching, there's no learning, there's no structure, nothing. In fact, just sitting. That's it. Just sitting. That's it. How hard can that be? To do nothing for a bit. Deliberately and consciously. Highly, highly alert within nothing. It actually is very difficult. Kotatama is the spirit breath, literally means spirit breath or breath of the gods, or soul breath, or power word, or magic word, sacred sound, mystical word. There's so many different ways of saying it, right? But the idea behind it is that within everything resides a magic. So within all words and all sounds, there is power and magic. And I've often said that language is magic. Magic is language. And the structure of language is the structure of experience. The structure of language is the structure of awareness, of consciousness. You change the structure of the language, you change the structure of the consciousness. In fact, when you think about it, when you listen to your clients and they go through a change, they talk differently, don't they? They don't say, I always blah blah anymore. I really hope not, if it's a negative thing. They are more likely to say, I used to always blah blah blah. I used to do this, I used to do that, I used to think this, rather than I think this, I think that, I think the other. So the language changes as the experience changes. There's also the sounds in between words, which are worth paying attention to. There are sounds in between the words, which work two ways. One, they work when they're coming towards me from someone else, and they show me insight into the internal workings of the person at that moment. It can be a momentary pause while they refill the buffer, for example, but it could also be, if you just take one letter, right? The word, the first letter of the alphabet in English, A. So you've got A, R, A for starters, so 3 sounds. A is actually the universal sound of upward direction in Japanese, and it's interesting enough, if it doesn't matter what language you speak, if you fall off a cliff, the sound you're likely to make is which is the sound of going up. It's like it's the last thing that you've got in your pocket of tricks, given that you've actually fallen, is like to attempt somehow to reverse that by chanting the upward sound. There are sounds for all sorts of things. If I go, huh? Then it means I just have no idea what you're talking about. If I go, it means I have insight into it. If I go, it's like a big insight. If I go, it means I'm on the borderline, but I have some questions about it. If it's, it means, matter of fact, job done, took that on board. Means, no, I'm not there. I probably have a lot of pushback on it. These sounds, right? How much attention do you pay to the sounds in between words? In fact, I invite you to go out there and ignore all the words that someone speaks, just as points of interest, and listen to what they're doing with the sounds in between the words. They're there. In fact, we could look at complicated printouts of language as it's happening, and you might be quite surprised to learn that where you think beginning and ending of words are in the readouts on a scope, they're quite often not there. There is not a discernible gap at the end of one word before another word begins. Quite often, the gap is mid-word and goes straight into another word. It's very, very interesting the way we are tuned into language is that we hear it in the way that we hear it, and so we interpret the sound itself. as if it has some meaning. But generally, I would say that most language only means what you want it to mean to a greater extent. Next discipline is Kundalini. And Kundalini is a word that's directly imported from the scriptures in India, has literally just been written into Japanese as katakana. So the word Kundalini is written in, gosh, I'm opening up a can of worms here. So far, I'm learning Japanese, by the way, in university, and so far I can read and write hiragana, which is the basic language that children learn in the beginning before they learn all the really squiggly stuff, which is called kanji, which I can't read. And katakana, which is basically phonetically exactly the same as hiragana, but it refers to foreign words. So Kundalini's just been brought straight in as Kundalini, and all the chanting in Kotatama to do with the Buddhist kind of ideas are all done directly translated from the original form into Japanese without interpretation. So the actual sound of the chant is basically exactly the same as it is in India. Kundalini, of course, as I said, is also represented by the spine. The spine and the Kundalini are very directly connected. And the magic symbol, of course, of the staff with the snakes entwined around it, which is the magic symbol for healing, which is on all ambulances and outside most pharmacies all over the world. Again, cross-cultural, there is the magic symbol. As if somehow having the magic symbol on that ambulance is going to help that person in their time of need. Going back in time, the stories of Moses in the Bible throwing the staff down and it turning into a snake, I would suggest to you that that's actually, through another interpretation that I have, it's about him creating a Kundalini event, and that's what was going on rather than the staff turning into a snake. So these things appear in language all over the world, but basically energy is part of it. And for me, having been learning Aikido now for so many years, and being a teacher and so on, what is Aikido? Well, I just explained before in terms of the language of it, what it means, but what is it? I mean, I have no idea in some ways what it is. What's language? I have no idea really in some ways, although I've been studying it all my life. There's a state though. There's a state of being that I inhabit that when I'm practicing Aikido and particularly Iaido, which I still haven't talked about, there's a state which I go into in the absence of any need for not being in that state, if you follow me. I can be all like far out, man, you know, but walking up the street, that's kind of all right. But if I was driving a car, I think I need to be a little bit more in control of the car than that. I think everything has its appropriate time, right? So the purpose of a dojo, again, is to remove all those things like cars and other random objects, and gives an absence of that so that I can concentrate on the experience itself. When I dial into somebody and I am in that lovely state, it seems to me very obvious when someone else commits to movement. They commit to move, and then a fraction of a second later, maybe a quarter of a second later, you can see on the outside the beginning of movement happening. But it's already happened. They've already sent the message, because it has to be sent to the body to do the movement that's being calculated. And at that point, there's no choice other than to complete the sequence of movements that have been calculated and sent. Now that's a very useful thing if what you're doing is walking up the stairs, because you just walk up the stairs. But when you've committed to a movement, that's it. Until that movement's complete, it's not complete. And so a pattern interrupt is literally that. It's literally the pattern has been engaged, and if the pattern's not completed and it's taken in a different direction, then the pattern's still incomplete until the mind can somehow reassociate and complete. In terms of martial art, it means when I sense that moment on a good day, I can begin my movement already knowing that that person's going to somehow move towards the space that I'm currently occupying. So all I need to do is to not occupy that space, and frankly, they'll miss. On a really good day, I then move to engage with that person by moving at the same time, speed, and direction as them. And if I move at the same time, speed, and direction as somebody else, then when the two touch, there's no clash at all, because they're both moving at the same time, same speed, the same direction, so they can be taken in a different direction. After that, a handshake interrupt is a classic hypnosis trick. I say trick because it's just a simple technique. Someone puts the hand out to shake hands, and instead of the hand being met with another hand to shake, the hand is simply taken back up to the face, and you start the process of doing the formal hypnotic induction. Look at your hand and notice the changing focus. And as you do, close your eyes and go inside, and so on and so forth. That's what a handshake interrupt is, a pattern interrupt. That's exactly what it is. In ancient times of hypnosis, people would look at a candle or a watch or a spot on the wall or my eye or my other eye or something else or nothing at all, or just close your eyes. You know, nowadays you've got like flashy lights that you could follow if you got those LED lights. I mean, there's, you know, it's basically just fixate the eyes, isn't it? That's basically what's going on. I want to be free of the form. So I want to be free of the form. So the only way to be free of the form is to learn the form thoroughly. In exactly the same way that when someone in a martial sense sends all the signals to the body and commits to the movement, then at that point they've committed. There's no choice whatsoever. They can't change direction with a punch. Once it's started, it goes straight to where it's been decided. And then at the end of that moment, a re-evaluation can continue. In terms of speaking, it's exactly the same. Once someone commits to speaking, it's already happening. And the signals are sent, and the vocal cords start to vibrate and oscillate, and air passes across it, and meaning is imbibed into this vibration that's the result of passing air across vibrating cords. And that emanates from me. And of course, in this instance, although I can hear it in the room, some of it is being captured by effectively a piece of paper that's moving forwards and backwards, which then causes a signal to travel along electrically, jump from me to the camera wirelessly, and then from the camera into its recorded form, which by the time you're watching it has gone through several more places and then being uploaded to the internet and back down to your computer or your tablet or phone or whatever it is that you're watching this on, of which a piece of paper in said device is moving forwards and backwards in exactly the same way that this piece of paper is currently. It's an expensive piece of paper, but it's effectively what's going on. and out of that, you're hearing sound, and you're surrounded by sound, in fact. But out of that sound that you're surrounded by at the moment, you're hearing what you consider to be my voice, and then you're interpreting and extracting from that sound meaning. And all of the time that you're doing that, you're either thinking about it or not. See, I think that the greatest addiction, and I do think that it's a terrible, terrible addiction, is thinking. And people seem to do it all the time. I would say the vast majority of the thousands of people that I've seen over 30 years, one way or the other, have actually been at the effect of thinking. That they've created a thought line in their head, and they've decided, so that's a decision, to keep it that way. To keep the pattern. In fact, when they're asleep, the pattern doesn't exist. So they have to wake up and do it again each day. So there's not much difference between someone who's basically happy every day and someone who isn't, other than that what they're doing with the feeling generator, to call it something, is putting something different in at the front end, and so they're getting something different out at the other end. It's quite simple. And children, when I work with children, they're very flexible. They're very, very flexible-minded. Their idea of reality is very, very fluid. And so if you show them a better way to do it, they usually will go with the better way, with a little bit of encouragement, because it's better, right? No matter what it is. You get someone who's a 50-year-old child, and they'll demand that, because it's took them 30 years to maintain this so rigidly that they can't just give it up. That's crazy, right? Of course they can. And in fact, at some point, if they stick with me, there will come a moment where they give it up. They could have just gone straight there, right? I've literally had people with their head in their hands in my clinic saying it can't be this simple, having just let go of something that's been, frankly, melting them for, years. And it's gone, right? They never want it back when I ask them, do they want it back? Which I always think is quite funny as well. But magic is language, and language is magic. So when you're listening to me, and you're working out whatever it is that you're working out from it, you're sitting there, you're listening, or you're standing there, wherever you are, however you are, you're listening to me. I certainly hope so. And you're having an experience. Now, the thing is, when I'm talking, I'm usually talking in a particular kind of a way which, when you think about it, you understand that when you just allow, instead of trying to think about what it is that I'm actually talking about, instead of doing that, which is a step away from my sound, that you just allow the language to flow through you instead. Let it flow through you as if you don't own it, you don't need to own it, so you can just allow it to continue to pass through you, and you know that you're understanding what it is that I'm saying. You're following the way that I'm talking. You know, for example, that I haven't got to the point that I'm heading towards at the moment because the tonality is such that you know that I haven't got there yet. Isn't that true? So, yeah, but hang on, but I'm definitely getting to a point because you can tell that I'm getting there. Now, when you think about it, you're thinking about this, you're following words, you know that you're understanding me, but my question is how? Because when I'm speaking, I'm only saying a few words really at the moment particularly, and there are really not very many of them, and none of them have any content in them at all, so there's certainly nothing there. I haven't said any of those words where I was a while back where I was naming words. I'm simply flowing freely and allowing it to happen, and you knowing that I will get to that point and getting to in a minute. Now, you understand yourself that you're listening to me now a little bit more closely, aren't you? And you're thinking, hang on, where are these words? Where are they going to? How did I arrive at this moment in time where I suddenly started to pay attention to the words and realised that there's not much he's talking about it, and I know he's talking about it, but I don't necessarily know what it is anymore because I've arrived at this moment. And the truth is that I'm literally just speaking a holding pattern at the moment of words so that you can understand that the words themselves don't necessarily mean very much. My attempt is to show you that free of the form is free of the form, right? The language that I'm speaking has form, the structure, that I know that somewhere inside me is making selections. There are strategies for which words. It's not word salad. It's not like a lack of understanding or meaning. In fact, I've only met one or two people really that fitted into that category ever. However, it's structured but doesn't have any content. Why is that important? Well, the way that people speak is more important than what they say. So how they say it is more important than what they say. So if you're a lawyer, I don't need to know about any lawyer speak or any of that. If you're a mechanic, I don't necessarily need to know what you're talking about when you're talking about valve stems and Woodruff keys. I don't need to know that. If I'm a client, I don't necessarily need to know what universal quantification is, you know. Do you think a 6-year-old child cares about selection or restriction violations? Right? It doesn't mean anything, right? It's professional language. So I can help a lawyer, I can help a banker, I can help an athlete, because the content of their life is theirs. And the process of how they go about it will be in the process language. So the process language is where I want to get to. The process language is the key. It's the key that unlocks all the doors. It's the key that Milton was alluding to throughout all of his teachings, and which he was actually doing. And I think that most people, frankly, missed it because they were too busy saying that it's complicated and hard to learn. And yet, think about it. It's there at prac, it comes back at master prac, it comes back at trainer's training, and you can be sure it's part of master trainer. Why? You know, it's just words, right? Just 19 patterns, you know, 23 if you have all the ambiguities listed separately. But besides that, it's not that, right? How can I employ myself in such a way that everything's easy? Everything's easy. And by making it easy for myself, I'm more and more in touch with that which I would call the mystical side of my experiencing, the magic. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. When you really know what hypnosis is, when you really know, everything is hypnosis. Everything is hypnosis. It's whether or not you're prepared to go to that place within yourself where you experience everything as hypnosis. If everything was perfect in your life right now, there would be nothing to do because everything would have been done. It's a nice theoretical space. But how close to that can I be at any given point? Now, some of what goes through my mind is literally me thinking. If I go inside the shed, as I call it, you know. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go inside the shed and go looking at versions of myself that I think used to exist, because for starters, it probably wasn't the way I'm remembering it anyway, according to Elizabeth Loftus anyway, and I kind of buy into her ideas. But the very act of the observation of the memory is the creation of that memory, which therefore gets changed by the act of observation. So I know it's an illusion. I know it's a hallucination. And I frankly don't bother with it that much. People say, yeah, but you talk about things from the past. Yeah, I do. Yeah, from time to time it does actually come out of my mouth, but not because I've pre-planned it. It comes out naturally because I'm actually standing at the gate and watching the flow without interrupting, more than I'm creating what I'm going to say or thinking about what I'm going to say. Because it's not something that I do. Hypnosis is not something I do. It's something I am. It's completely different. And in order to get it, I had to give up everything. Or the illusion that I was about to give up everything. Because actually, a second later, in 1997, everything was exactly the way it was before. But I thought it wasn't going to be. And that comes back to the old idea that you arrive on the shores of nirvana and have to laugh because you realise you never left. After the laundry, after enlightenment, the laundry. It's the same thing. So, during my presentation at the conference this year, I'm going to dip into some of what I've been talking about and go into more detail. It's not that I want you to all start learning Japanese like I am, or following a Japanese system, or any system, in fact, because they're all just forms at the end of the day. And being free of the form is where it's at. Being free of the form is where it's at. Spontaneous expression rather than contained within a form. Otherwise, there's just lots of complicated words to learn, right? And yeah, they're useful to talk to someone else about, but other than that, they're not really that useful, right? I could talk about all the different Japanese that I know, but really it doesn't alter how it actually is to be me. The natural expression of Aikido is not the forms that I've learned. The very rare instances of the expression, the physical expression of the conversation known as Aikido, because Aikido is a physical conversation. It's a conversation. It's a natural exchange of ideas leading to a natural conclusion. It's a conversation. It just happens to be a physical one rather than a verbal one. Music is a conversation. I once toured with a group of African people for about 3 years, and they were from Senegal and Gambia, or the Gambia as they kept telling me, and Mali, other places around the Western African continent, and I didn't speak Wolof or Mandinka or Swahili or any of their languages actually, and they didn't speak English. But when we played music, we were speaking a language, and that language was ancient, and tapped into the ancient mystical process. Music, martial arts, language. There's a certain amount of language that you have to speak. But again, before it emerges, it's already happening. In other words, what I'm inviting you to do is to get back to the place from which it's emerging in the first place. And that'll be, I guess, the point of the presentation from me in the conference this year. And just finally, because I'm aware that the loop's open and probably the judges out there are still wondering about it. Iaido is a subset training inside Aikido. Iaido is the art of drawing a live blade. So some people call it a samurai sword. It's really not at all what it's called. But you get the idea. It took me 12 years to learn how to draw the sword out of the scabbard. 12 years, right? One day I'll learn how to get it back in there. But it took 12 years because there were so many things to observe in that split second that it took 12 years to be able to observe all of those things in that split second. Think about that. Think about that level of awareness being brought to a client. Think about how useful that would be for you to be able to observe a client on that kind of scale. And that, to me, is what my teaching is all about. It's about teaching people effectively how to get themselves, should they wish to, into this position themselves, so they too can go out there. And sure, there's work to be done, right? If you haven't got the sensory acuity, you've still got to develop it. It's not going to be like mine is after 40 odd years of development, right? It'll be like it is after 1 week of development or whatever it is, you know, or whatever. If you might have been doing something for 20 years, whatever it is, it's still whatever it is. But it doesn't mean that you can't, because I'm not particularly special. I'm just someone who's applied himself in a particular way. But in conclusion, I would say that I'm free, completely free. And I've learned how to be free, and I've learned how to structure it and put it into a form that can be replicated, and how to teach it to other people so they can have it too. And I do believe that the forms of NLP and hypnosis, timeline therapy and coaching as taught by TJC are a very, very useful format and a platform from which you can leap. I do believe in the methodology. But outside of it is spontaneous, natural expression and experiencing. So the Japanese have a saying, Hibi Shoshin, which means every day, a new mind, a beginner's mind. Every day, learn and abandon. Learn and abandon. Learn and abandon. This moment, this moment, this moment. When you get it, it leads to living what I can only describe as a richly, supremely satisfying life, full of joy, full of fun, and being exactly who I am. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. I do suggest for the advanced people that repeated viewings will reveal more layers